Folks, thanks for coming out. We were here about a little more than a year ago to stand up to try to oppose this homeless shelter behind us. And the one thing that's clear, I think we can all agree upon, is the only thing that's different between last year and this year, there's a green fence behind us. We know nothing more about what's being planned. We know nothing more than what's being dumped in the heart of Grasmere. We have a beautiful community around here. People who put their life savings into building and renovating their homes. Could be 900 million or more. And our view was if you could put a homeless shelter here, you could put a homeless shelter anywhere in Staten Island. So as much as we've tried to deal with what the previous administration dumped on Staten Island and perhaps a good chunk of the city, we're not going away. I'm here with Councilmember David Carr, Assemblyman Michael Tannousis, Dr. Ram Raju, John Tobacco, and members of the Grasmere Civic Association and others, which Councilmember Carr will introduce. Obviously our main concern is we don't want it, right? And there's a lot of reasons why it shouldn't be here. But in particular, this facility, there's no clarity. If anybody across Staten Island wanted to renovate or build a home or whatever, they'd have to jump through hoops, some good, some bad, to get a permit, to do the job, and pretty much everybody will know what you're doing. And if you don't do it, you're in trouble. These folks behind us are doing whatever they want, and we have no clue what's going on. To the best of our knowledge, it ultimately will be about a 9,000 square foot facility, of which we're told about 2,400 or so, less than that, square feet is for the purposes of providing these services. And if you do the math, that leaves about 40 to 44 square feet per person. That's like a cell. It's an inmate cell. When you think about it, 4 by 10. This is the area for one person. Some folks are going to address the provider that have facilities throughout the city, and so far it doesn't look too good on their record, which means that if things are not going well inside, things are not going well outside. And the people who will suffer the most are the people who live in and around here in Grasmere. What we're trying to do at all levels of government here is to fight back and to stand up for the people of Grasmere to try to stop this thing in its tracks. We're not going away. We're doing what we can. If we have to, we'll sue. Councilmember Carr and I and Assemblyman Tannousis have been discussing that this week, trying to figure out the best way without leading anybody on. We want to feel secure about what we're doing. And we just hope that reason prevails. We know in the city of New York, reason doesn't often prevail, and too often just pick up the newspaper and you see common sense went out the window. But right now, common sense is not working here, and we're trying to inject it back in so that the city puts the brakes on this thing. Wants to have a discussion where else it may be, fine. But for now, stop this thing in its tracks. With that, I want to call up Councilman David Carr, who's been on this issue for quite some time. Thank you.
Thank you, Borough President Fossella. Thank you, as always, for your leadership and for standing up for our community each and every day that you've been in office. It's been almost 5 months since Bill de Blasio left City Hall, but we're still feeling the negative effects of his time in office. And we're here because of Bill de Blasio's New York City Department of Homeless Services that still seems to be acting like it's his Department of Homeless Services. As the Borough President referenced, it's been over a year since we started this fight, and we seem to have inched further and further along towards the shelter becoming an unfortunate reality in our community. I'm from Grasmere. I've lived here my entire life. I know, just as each and every one who assembled here today, that this is not the place for a homeless shelter. Beyond the impacts on the community, it's also going to be wrong for the people that they're looking to shelter here. The Borough President got into the details. How much space are these people really going to be having if they're going to be put here? Is it going to be a livable, humane facility? It doesn't sound like it to me, and this agency has the nerve to call this a shelter for fellow human beings. And they're going to be crammed in tight, confined spaces akin to a jail cell, or the kind of slum tenement that we saw at the turn of the last century that we've all heard stories about from our immigrant forebears. This is the wrong place for this facility. The city has consistently done the wrong thing with respect to Staten Island, starting with trying to house homeless in the hotels in the Travis community several years ago, And elected leaders made it clear at that time, Staten Islanders are generous people. We want to be supportive of the homeless need here in Staten Island, but it has to be done in the right way, in the right place, and this isn't it. And we're not going to have a negotiation with somebody who refuses to listen to reason and is dead set on making a really bad shelter in the middle of our community, without regard to the details of how they're going to live, how they're going to be integrated in the community, what kind of security that they're going to have on site. We need more details from the city, and they've been resistant to give it because they're not thinking about the community's interests, let alone the interests of the people they're looking to give shelter to. They're just looking to get a notch on their belt and say, see, we got another shelter up. And so we're going to continue to fight day in and day out. We're going to look at every option we have on the table. The Borough President mentioned legal options. We're definitely going to be considering those, and if it looks like we have a path to success there, we'll pursue it. So we're going to do everything that we can to try to make this shelter a figment of the past that fortunately would never come here. So we appreciate all of your support. Thank you to the Borough President again, and I'll turn things over to my colleague, Assemblyman Tannousis.
Thank you so much, Councilman Carr, and thank you to Borough President Fossella for inviting me here today. You know, this has been going on. A year and a half ago, they came to us and they said, or actually, they didn't even come to us. They released it without coming to us, telling us about this homeless shelter. And we found out in the newspapers. We pushed them, we pushed them, we pushed them. 50 women to live here. 30 staffers to work here. No parking. Any room that would be constructed in this facility would be smaller than a Rikers Island cell. And they're supposed to live here. And we pushed them, and we pushed them, and we had conversations with the de Blasio administration. They even told me, send us alternative sites. I sent them alternative sites. They shut down. Adams came in. Conversation continued. And what are they doing? They're going forth. They're going forth even though there have been 45 motor vehicle car accidents at this intersection since 2018. This is disgraceful. How many different ways do we have to tell these people that this homeless shelter here will not work? This is a recipe for disaster. It's a tragedy in waiting. We are here to let them know we will fight vigorously. We have both eyes open, and we will continue to fight. And I am telling you, I hope to God that we are not here at this corner one day mourning the death of one of our residents, one of the residents here or one of the neighbors. Thank you very much.
And just a point of fact, for example, you look at the applications, it says that they're not expanding the footprint. Yet they say on their application that they're going to go at least 12 foot down into the ground, excavate at least 12 foot down. Does that mean they're going to have a sub-cellar in this? So they claim they're not going up and they're not going out, but they're going down. So you know, just think about that for a minute of having it into a sub-basement. And try to do that, by the way, folks, at your own house and see if you get away with it. And speaking of, I just want to acknowledge Lily from Congresswoman Lily Popper's office. Lily, thanks for coming out. And someone who's a very nationally renowned public health official who fortunately now works with us in our office. He was the former head of CEO of New York Health Hospitals Corporation. He can speak a little bit about the insanity of putting folks like this here. Dr. Robert, thank you.
Thank you, Borough President, and thank you, electors. I've been in public health for 20 years of my life. That's what I dealt with. I understand the homeless issue, how it's coupled with mental health issues, and also it is significantly involved in criminal justice. So sometimes the solution to the problem cannot be worse than the problem itself. The solution, what they're trying to do, is going to be worse than the problem they're trying to solve. Because having the combination of lack of adequate mental health in the city as a whole, and especially the homeless shelters, we see this every single day in the news items in the New York City. How the mental health illness and the homeless services is creating a dangerous situation in subways, and that will probably extend to this, because having seen that, the combination of it, the security and the safety of this neighborhood is definitely in deep trouble. So I think this is the wrong place, and this is a wrong idea, and the solution is worse than the problem they're trying to solve. So I think as a Staten Islander, for many, many years, for decades now, I think we should fight this, and we should continue to ask for transparency from these agencies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just so you know, Dr. Rajiv has headed the 2 largest public health hospital systems in the United States, so we thank you for your service. Now with a gentleman who's a dear friend and been a strong fighter for the people across Staten Island, the city, John Tobacco. John.
Thank you, Borough President, Congresswoman Mayataki's office, Assemblyman Tannousis, with Councilmember Carr. I'll just say this, I don't have to parse my words as much as these folks because they're elected. But as far as I can see, 6 months ago or so, I stood out here, Vito was here, the Assemblyman and hopeful councilman were out here fighting against this. And New York City has a long history of politicians getting out on the campaign trail saying we're going to fight against this and fight against that and the other thing when they're trying to get elected or they're trying to get votes or they're trying to raise money. Okay, so to me, it makes me feel good that we know we have guys that follow up on the issue, and women, of course, really. And they're still out here when they're no longer looking for your votes because they care about this community. Now, just myself, I joined a group of guys who stood up to Mayor de Blasio when Mac's Public House was shut down during the lockdowns. And if you remember, Bill de Blasio and his regime told us a couple of weeks, we're going to shut it down, we're going to put on masks. And it's very reminiscent of this. They're saying, well, there's only going to be a few people. There's only going to be 20% of the space used for this, okay? Bill de Blasio was a cancer on this city. Anything that goes up and comes out of the ground in this city must die that has his name on it. And if you think, Doc could probably weigh in a little better than me, but if you think about it, when you got cancer or you got an illness and then they have to pump all this stuff in you to try to get it out of you, your body's never the same again until you get it all out. Okay, you gotta have a colonic, basically. And what Staten Island needs is a Bill de Blasio colonic. And to me, it starts right here on the ground with the grassroots to tell Bill de Blasio, you're in your political grave, and tell Eric Adams, just like we did at Mac's Public House, Staten Islanders are not going to sit there quietly and go into the night. We're going to stand up, we're going to fight back, and we're going to punch a bully in the mouth. And we got some of the greatest fighters I've ever seen to stop this crap. And I'll leave you with this. Bill de Blasio's answer to homelessness was a $1 billion program called the Thrive Program. His wife stole the $1 billion. They could have spent a heck of a lot of that more money building places like this in appropriate locations. And once and for all, let's tell Bill de Blasio and his administration, you're dead, leave Staten Island alone.
The numbers, because they're talking about a contract, we believe $730,000 a year. You divide that by the 50 or so people we believe are supposed to be here, and it comes out to about $16,000, $17,000 a year. You put in the square foot, you're talking about the equivalent of about a $1.5 million home if you do per square foot. Is that the way your tax, forget everything else about this site, is that the way your tax money should be spent? I say no. Lily, you want to say anything on behalf of the Congressman? All right, so Councilmember Carr is going to come up here and introduce a few of the civic associations. As we said at the outside, Staten Islanders, we stand united when we can, and if it can happen here, it can happen everywhere, and Councilman Carr is going to call a few of the folks up.
Thank you, Borough President. Thank you, everyone who's spoken so far. I just want to acknowledge some civic leaders who are coming from outside the neighborhood. You know, the Borough President said, you know, one of the great issues relating to this site is that it's really emblematic that these shelters can really be put anywhere, right? So we're talking about Grasmere and South Beach today, but we could be talking about another neighborhood tomorrow. And so I want to appreciate those civic leaders who are good neighbors to this community and came here in support. Jean Guerra from the Travis Civic Association. Good to see you, Jean. Mark Anderson from the Westerly Improvement Society. Thank you, Mark. And I'm going to acknowledge a couple more, but I'm going to bring the next folks up to say a few words, starting with the head of the Grasmere Civic Association, Frank Ninavaji. Frank, you want to come up and say a few words?
I just want to say thank you, David, and all our elected officials for keeping the focus on this issue. As they've said, it's really inappropriate for the site, not only for the residents, but for the people that will be living here. Everyone knows that Steuben Street and Highland Boulevard is an accident-prone location. There's a lot of traffic here, and the site isn't appropriate in terms of scale for the residents. For these reasons, we feel it's inappropriate. Thank you again, gentlemen. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Frank. Next up to speak, President of the South Beach Civic Association, Joe McAllister.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone here today, standing up what our rights are as citizens in Staten Island. South Beach, right across the street here. This was dumped on us here. We had no voice whatsoever. This is unacceptable. We care for the shelters, the homeless people, but at this time of day and age, this was just dumped here. Where is our voices, our communities to say, we don't want this? We have a voice, like Vito said, we pay taxes. Our tax dollars are being spent foolishly. And this is what they do to us, they just dump it. And out here today, on a beautiful Saturday, we're out here fighting. For what? To get rid of this, to do the right thing by all of us here? It should have been done the first time, say to the committee, what is your input? What do you think about this? We have lots of places on Staten Island, other than here, that should have been placed. South Beach Psychiatric Center has lots of places there, rooms, they could accommodate them fully to house all these people. Again, we care for these shelters that are in place, but not here in South Beach, in Grasmere. You know, it's just a shame that our elected officials taking the time out, all of you people again coming down here and fighting on a beautiful day on Saturday. We got things to do besides fighting all the time. It has to stop. Come out and do the right thing for us, please. Thank you all to the elected officials. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And Joe raises a great point that I'll just raise before bringing up the last speaker, is that Senator Savino and Assemblyman Fall, our Democratic colleagues, actually enacted legislation that was going to beef up the public input process for shelter sites. So when Joe McAllister talks about where was the public's voice, well, the de Blasio administration knew when that law was coming into effect and put forward the shelter ahead of that deadline so they could avoid the oversight of that new law. And that's a damn shame, because every community deserves to have a voice when something like this is going to be proposed for their neighborhood. And so I want to bring up our last speaker today, a community leader and advocate and a neighbor here in this community, Lorenzo De Luca.
Thanks. You know me, I live on Radcliffe Road, and I'm a lawyer, and I started a lawsuit a year ago, and we didn't get very far with it. The judge rejected it essentially on procedural grounds. He said that we as a community didn't have the right to challenge the decisions of the building department and how they decided to allow this building to be built. I filed an appeal. We're talking about whether or not it's going to be go forward or not. But in many respects, and I want to thank everybody for being here, for the help that they've done on behalf of my neighbors and friends. We look at this as a kind of a law enforcement problem. There is a law, it's called the zoning law, that we all have to abide by. I think Vito referred to that. We have to live by that, but apparently the city doesn't. So that law is not being enforced, the zoning law. There are other laws that aren't being enforced. There's a mental hygiene law passed a long time ago in connection with the Willowbrook. Now, that building next door is operated under the mental hygiene law. And there are 9 people in that building, and that building is larger than this one. Now, if somebody had come along and said, well, we're going to operate this building according to the mental hygiene law, there would be 9 people. That's not so bad. We can live with that. Barbara and I, my wife and I, live next door to a very special place, and we really never had a problem with it. We lived there, for a very long time. So the issue is the bulk, it's the congregate living aspects of this property, and that the fact that we as a society, the whole of New York State, still allows congregate living during this era is a shame. And that's the one area I think that should be addressed on a bipartisan basis. This isn't a partisan issue. Why should people be forced to live 3 feet apart in an open bed? I mean, you talk about cells, this is even worse. Especially during the era of COVID, where there's all these other issues, that should not be allowed. These properties, especially since they're talking about putting people with mental health issues. Well, if they have mental health issues,
Why isn't the mental hygiene law applied? Why did they allow those people to be mistreated in this way? Why? So they could put them into a mental hygiene facility afterwards? Makes no sense. And I think these are the kinds of issues that I hope we can address, and maybe you know, with some help from other people. I don't have the horsepower myself. I'm a semi-retired lawyer involved in real estate, but if I had some help, I think we could probably address some of these issues. Anyway, thank you so much for your support.
Thank you. I just want to bring up another point of fact. As we reviewed the documents, and I'm watching this water flow. It's not raining, so it's got to be coming from somewhere.
It's a pool.
It's a pool. Okay, let's go for a swim. We asked about the sewer connection. It was years ago. We don't know if this was on dry wells. Maybe Lorenzo knows.
It's on river. It's on rivers.
The original approval required them to connect to the storm sewer that hadn't been built at the time.
But the whole property's on rivers over here.
Yeah, it is on. There's a river. So the storm sewer was built a couple of years ago. So the building obviously never complied and connected to it. All of the dry wells here are all silted over. They're completely full. So there's absolutely no water going anywhere. And if you look under that part of the building, there is a sinkhole where the water is sort of going down and going underground somewhere.
And to the best of our knowledge, we don't know if they're connected to either the storm sewer or the sanitary sewer.
They're connected to the sanitary sewer on Steuben Street, but because it's an upward flow, there is a pump. So the pump is actually at level with the basement, with the current basement. So I don't know how they expect to get the sewage from the new basement up to the...
Right, and to bear in mind that this was a doctor's office open only a handful of hours per day, a few people in and out. Now you want 50 people living in here, if not more, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, do the sanitary sewer math. No, I'll just finish. Everybody else wants to say anything if you have any questions.
I had a question.
I grew up in South Beach. My mother, who was just here, she's 82 today. Happy birthday, Mom. She grew up in Allendale. It goes back 70 years in this neighborhood. It's beautiful. We don't want to see it ruined. So, anybody else?
How come, can I just ask you about the building permit? Does the Staten Island Building Department has control of blocking this development? Because I see this has to be issued on Staten Island, these building permits, if they're doing any work.
So this was processed through the so-called hub. And by the way, as a parent, this was done under COVID emergency, right? Emergency's over. Thing hasn't been built. So the emergency's over. Why can't we stop this? But sometimes, and I'm no expert in this, but sometimes permits are processed with the so-called hub, which is somewhere in Manhattan. And the Staten Island office is relatively just there as an adjunct supportive. Don't quote me on that, but that's the way it was. That's the way it was permitted. We're trying to ask every question possible. Has it been done thoroughly? The people in Manhattan, do they even have a clue what this community looks like? They saw something and they were told from up above, rubber stamp this. By the way, it took about 8 weeks for this thing to be approved.
I got a question for you.
Try to go get your house renovation approved within 8 weeks. Impossible. Just a normal, plain vanilla is going to take you 6 months or more. This thing was done in 8 weeks.
No, I got a question for you here. Hello.
I want to add
Hello,
to that.
I got a question here.
I just want to add to that answer, and then we'll move on to other questions. The community board unanimously voted this project down. Obviously, that was not a binding vote, but one of the reasons they voted it down, besides everything that was wrong with the site, is the Department of Homeless Services representatives, as well as the representatives of the not-for-profit that is going to, in theory, be running the shelter. All of them said, all the leadership said, none of them actually came to visit the site when it was chosen. The not-for-profit said, oh, we have people who do that. DHS didn't even claim they had people that do that. They just, they're just happy to have a site. So to, the point that I think you're making, which is like, does anybody really have any idea what this looks like or is going to look like? The answer is no.
The point that I'm making is that we have, building department is on Staten Island, and it should go through the zoning board in Staten Island, and a building, building commissioner in Staten Island. So can we block that?
We made that point, right?
Excuse me.
Hold on, I just want to finish this down and then we'll move on. The Board of Standards and Appeals issued the special permit for this to be a doctor's office.
Correct.
Yes.
And we made the arguments last year when this thing was first coming down the pike that if you're going to try to do something here and piggyback off the community use facility that is or was the doctor's office, you need to go back to the Board of Standards and Appeals and ask them for approval to do that. And what they basically said is, no, we don't have to. Zoning laws have changed since then. We're not going to go back to Board of Standards and Appeals. And that's one of the reasons why they went to the hub that Borough President Fossella is talking about in the city, because they knew that they may get a different answer from the local borough office than they would have gotten if they went to 280 Broadway. And so that these are some of the things that the Borough President, the Assemblyman, and I are trying to tackle now, is try to get some clarity and oversight over this permitting process.
Is that even a possibility if you to go through the hub in the city versus getting a building permit on Staten Island, since the job is on Staten Island?
Well, again, the city decided that they would go through the hub instead of the borough office, right? And so that's what we're talking about, trying to get from the buildings department clarity on what they're actually allowing here and what kind of oversight they're actually exercising over this construction or pre-construction process. So that's the avenue that we're trying to take right now.
Hello, I got a question here. Since it's a non-rental neighborhood, what's going to give you the right to approve degenerates in the neighborhood? It's a non-rental community. There's no rental in this area at all. My family owned 90% of this area since the bridge went up. I live on the corner here. What's going to give you the rights to put degenerates in our neighborhood when it's a non-rental community?
So we don't think that this site is appropriate. We don't think it's consistent with the zoning resolution. Obviously, this is a neighborhood of 1- and 2-family homes. Those individuals, those property owners can choose to rent.
No, non-rental.
Generally, they don't, but people are free to rent or lease the
illegally.
Property. But this is inappropriate. This site is inappropriate. It's not consistent with zoning. It's not consistent with Board of Standards and Appeals decisions, and that's among many of the reasons why we're trying to fight.
Anybody else?
Again, I'm Gene Guerra. I'm the president of the Travis Civic Association, and I have a vested interest.
Gene, why don't you stand here so everybody
I have a vested interest in what is planned for this site here. If you know the 440 at Victory Boulevard, there are 3 hotels there. Those 3 hotels were built thinking that there was going to be a NASCAR track right by the Goethals Bridge. So somebody jumped on the property thinking they were going to make a ton of money. Well, that didn't happen. And those hotels now are sheltering various types of people. I'm in fear of what might happen here will happen in Travis. So I am here to support the Grasmere community in stopping this, because like here, Travis is a residential area. We have schools very close by those hotels. You've got legal marijuana being smoked in the streets now, right by schoolyards. Lord knows, because as David would know, while Jimmy was borough president and Steve was our councilman, we worried about those hotels, am I right? And there was a point where it's either hit and miss. I am here to support you folks because you don't need this like I will not need that, okay? Good luck, and I pray for you.
Anybody else? This is all we're collectively here about improving the quality of life for the people of Staten Island. Anybody who wants to do it, we're on board. Anybody who wants to diminish it, no way. This diminishes the quality of life. Yes, sir.
Go ahead. You want to set out of the view.
Yes. Hi, my name is Ibrahim Youssef. I work for city for 31 years. I'm 68 years old. I live across the street right here. The first one will be affected from this homelessness shelter is me and my family and my neighbors around. What they're doing here is not right. We file a complaint not once, not twice, more than that. My son complained, my daughters complain, everybody around us complain, but they don't listen. What's going on? They waiting for what? They waiting for a disaster to happen. This homelessness is a human being, we're supporting them and everything, but they are not gonna stick inside. They're gonna spread to the community outside. And this is, believe me, it's wrong. There is 1 million other places, even in Staten Island. They can put this shelter there. In this age, where I'm gonna move, where I'm gonna go, how I'm gonna support myself. I'm in version of retirement very soon. Believe me, it's wrong, it's wrong. Also, I would like to thank you for coming here and supporting us. Thanks for all city community. I appreciate your coming and your concern and your time, because this means that you concern about us. And believe me, if you need any support from this community, I'll be the first one. Okay? Thank you.
Can I ask you a question? Now, in the age of cameras on streets to protect students,
Can you go up there and talk?
of course. There's a question. In the age of putting up cameras to protect students, we now have St. Joseph Hill, which is about a half a mile away. And we have the disabled individuals next door. When I was here 6 months ago, they said that a number of the people that are going to be placed here have criminal histories. So is that something that's being taken into account, that you're now a half a mile away from the school where students take this path on buses and whatnot in order to go to school, and we have disabled people next door who can't defend themselves? Now you're putting former criminals, not all of them, but some of them, who may be in a position to compromise their safety.
The answer is we have no clue, right? And that's why one of the reasons we're here, because there's been no transparency. In addition to Hill, there's PS 39, my alma mater. PS 46 is down the block as well. So there is none, right? So this is why we're trying to galvanize this and highlight the hypocrisy of saying they're trying to protect this neighborhood, when in reality, whether it's a car accident or taking advantage of somebody nearby who's helpless, there is no solution. And the reality is that they've been negligent, if not more so, of not even dealing with it as a potential situation or problem. And by the way, you know, the same people that are telling you that people can sleep in the subways and we should let them there, they're homeless, but they're really not, they're mentally challenged, they need help. The same people who say that's not a problem are the same people who put this thing here. So let's just keep that in the back of our mind. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming out on Saturday.